30 seconds. That's all it took for a normal flight to turn into a falling metal coffin. At 28,000 feet, the cabin lights flickered. A violent bang tore through the body of the jet, and the nose dropped like something grabbed the plane and yanked it straight down. People didn't scream at first. They froze, like their brains couldn't accept what their bodies were already feeling. Then the screams came, sharp and wild, seat belts snapping tight, phones flying, overhead bins shaking like they wanted to burst open. And in the middle of all that panic, a teenager in a faded hoodie did the one thing nobody else could even imagine. She unbuckled, stood up, and started walking toward the cockpit like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. Grown men yelled at her to sit down. A woman grabbed her sleeve crying. The flight attendant's face turned ghost white. But the girl didn't stop, because she wasn't guessing. She wasn't being brave for attention. She was following training she was never supposed to have. When the cockpit door finally cracked open, the pilots were fighting the controls like they were wrestling a beast. Alarms were screaming, the horizon was gone, and the ground was rushing up too fast. The captain turned his head and shouted, "Who are you?" The girl stepped forward, voice calm, eyes locked, and said 5 words that made the entire room go still. "I'm Raven, I've got this." 2 minutes later, military jets were in the air, and 198 lives were hanging on the words of a 16-year-old nobody noticed in seat 14C. Before you hear how she did it, comment where you're watching from. And if you want more true-style aviation stories like this, hit subscribe and stay with me. Seat 14C was the kind of seat nobody wanted, stuck between strangers, no window control, no aisle freedom, just 3 quiet hours of waiting. The girl in the middle seat didn't complain. She slipped on her headphones, rested her tablet on her knees, and opened her homework like this flight was just another boring routine. On her left, a man in a pressed shirt typed non-stop on his laptop, numbers and charts filling his screen. On her right, a woman flipped pages of a paperback romance, already halfway through a bottle of water. Neither of them asked her name. Neither of them wondered who she was. To them, she was just another teenager passing through the sky. Ripped jeans, worn sneakers, oversized hoodie pulled slightly over her hands, dark hair tied back without effort. The kind of girl adults look past without a second thought. Probably heading home for a holiday, probably tired, probably counting minutes until landing. She stared out the window as the city below faded into clouds. Music low, mind half on her homework and half nowhere at all. Math problems filled the screen, but her eyes kept drifting to the reflection staring back at her. Calm face, steady breathing, the look of someone used to being inside her own head. No one on that plane knew her name. No one knew what she had been taught before most kids learned how to ride a bike. No one noticed the way her fingers tapped the edge of the tablet. Not nervous, rhythmic, like muscle memory. To everyone else on that flight, she was invisible. Just a quiet teenager killing time at 28,000 feet. And that was exactly why what happened next would shock the entire cabin. That hoodie she wore wasn't just old or faded, it carried weight. It had once belonged to her mother, a woman whose name was spoken with respect in military hangars and control rooms. A fighter pilot with thousands of hours in the sky, medals locked away in drawers, and stories she never liked to tell. When the girl was small, her world was narrow and intense. Her father was gone before she could really remember his face. Lost in a training accident the military never explained in detail. After that, it was just the two of them, mother and daughter, moving between bases, early mornings, and quiet nights. And somewhere between homework and bedtime stories, something unusual began. Her mother noticed how fast she learned, how she could picture movement in space, how her reactions came before fear. So instead of telling her to slow down, she trained her. It started with simulators before sunrise, empty rooms humming with screens and switches, emergency drills that most pilots never see until real danger arrives, engine failures, dead controls, impossible landings, repeated until mistakes disappeared. By the time other kids were learning to drive, she was calculating airspeed and fuel burn in her head. She flew small planes under careful supervision, learned how machines behaved when they were hurt, not when they were perfect. It was illegal, dangerous, and hidden from almost everyone. Then the sky took her mother too. A rescue mission, enemy fire, a plane that didn't make it back, a folded flag, a silent funeral, and a promise forced from a broken teenager. Her grandfather, a retired general with a limp and a stern voice, made her swear she was done with flying. No more cockpits, no more call signs, no more living in the past. So she became normal, or tried to. New city, new school, good grades, sports, smiles that looked real enough. 2 years without touching a control stick. 2 years pretending the sky didn't still call her name. The first sign wasn't fear, it was sound. A deep, violent bang slammed through the plane like something heavy had struck it from below. Not the soft shake of turbulence, not the rattling bumps people complain about. This was sharp and wrong. Her fingers froze on the tablet. Every muscle in her body tightened at once. Because she knew that sound. The cabin reacted in slow motion. Heads lifted, eyes widened. The man beside her pulled off his headphones, confused. Someone laughed nervously, waiting for the moment to pass. But it didn't pass. The aircraft shuddered again, harder this time. Overhead bins rattling like they might tear loose. A scream broke out from the back of the cabin, raw and sudden. She pulled out her earbuds and listened, really listened. The engine tone wasn't steady anymore. It whined and surged like it was struggling to breathe. The plane felt heavy, unbalanced, like it was fighting itself. Then the captain's voice came over the speakers, controlled but thin. Flight attendants, be seated immediately. No explanation, no calming words, just an order. Her heart started pounding. That sentence meant the pilots didn't have time to reassure anyone. They were busy trying to keep the plane in the air. A moment later, gravity shifted. The nose dipped forward, not gently, but with intent. People slid in their seats as the angle steepened. Books hit the floor, bags dropped. Someone's phone shattered against the wall. The woman beside her grabbed her arm, nails digging in, eyes wide with terror. "This doesn't feel normal," she whispered. She didn't answer. Because the inner ear never lies. And everything inside her said the same thing. They were no longer flying. They were falling. The dive grew steeper by the second. Not a slide, not a controlled descent, but a hard pull toward the ground, like gravity had finally won. The captain's voice returned, and this time it was different. Strained, rushed, no script left to hide behind. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a serious control problem. Please assume brace positions." That was the moment the cabin changed. Hope drained out of the air, replaced by raw truth. This wasn't a delay. This wasn't an emergency landing. This was the end. People stopped screaming and started saying goodbye. Phones were pressed to ears, voices breaking. "I love you. I'm sorry. Please take care of the kids." The man beside her clasped his hands and prayed out loud. The woman on her other side cried openly, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. All around them, strangers held hands like family. The angle kept increasing. Her body was pressed forward by the force, seatbelt biting into her hips. Every instinct screamed how fast they were dropping, how little time remained. She did the math without meaning to. Altitude, descent rate, airspeed climbing too fast. Minutes became seconds. For the first time, fear punched straight through her chest. She thought of her grandfather waiting for her, of the life she hadn't lived yet, of the sky she had promised never to touch again. And then, through the chaos, a voice cut through everything. Not from the speakers, not from the cabin. From inside her, steady and familiar. "You know what to do." Her mother's voice didn't sound scared. It sounded certain. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing slowed. The noise around her faded like it had been turned down. She reached for the seatbelt. Unclipped it. The man next to her grabbed her arm, panic flooding his face. "Sit down, we're supposed to brace." She gently pulled free and stood up anyway. Legs steady, eyes forward. Because in that moment, she understood something no one else did. Sitting still meant waiting to die. And she had never been trained to do that. The aisle felt tilted, like the floor itself was trying to throw her backward. She moved anyway, one step at a time, gripping seatbacks as the plane pitched and shuddered. Every few rows someone reached out to stop her, voices cracking, begging her to sit down. She didn't look back. At the front of the cabin, a young flight attendant sat frozen in his jump seat, strapped in so tight his knuckles had turned white. His eyes flicked between her and the cockpit door like he was seeing a ghost walk toward him. "I need to get inside," she said, clear and calm. He stared at her, disbelief flashing across his face. "No, you don't. Get back to your seat right now." The plane dropped again, hard. A wave of screams rolled through the cabin. They were running out of time. She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "I can help them," she said. "And if I don't, nobody on this plane is walking away." He shook his head, panic taking over. "You're a kid." She met his eyes, steady and unblinking. "I was trained by a fighter pilot," she said. "I know what this feels like, and I know how to stop it." For a moment, he hesitated, caught between rules and reality. Then the cockpit door shook as another alarm screamed from inside. That sound made the decision for him. He grabbed the intercom phone with shaking hands. "Captain," he said, voice breaking. "There's a passenger out here claiming she can help. She says she's trained." Silence, heavy and terrifying. Then a voice came back, exhausted and desperate. "Send her in." The latch clicked. The cockpit door cracked open. She stepped through and into chaos. Warning lights flashing, alarms blaring, controls fighting back. Two pilots straining against a machine that no longer wanted to fly. They turned toward her at the same time, disbelief written across their faces. "What do you know?" one of them snapped, barely holding the nose up. She didn't hesitate. "Tell me exactly what failed," she said, eyes already scanning the instruments. Because this wasn't a teenager standing in the cockpit anymore. This was the moment all her training had been waiting for. Her eyes moved fast, not frantic, reading the panel like it was speaking to her. Altitude dropping too quickly, airspeed climbing into danger, controls responding late or not at all. This wasn't one small failure. The plane was hurt, badly. "We've lost most hydraulics," the first officer shouted over the alarms. "The controls aren't biting." She nodded once, already thinking ahead. "Stop fighting it straight on," she said, voice cutting through the noise. "You won't win that way." Both pilots looked at her, stunned. "What are you saying?" the captain asked, sweat running into his eyes. "Use the engines," she replied. "Asymmetric thrust." The words hung in the cockpit. "That's not standard," the first officer said, fear creeping into his voice. "That could make it worse." "You're already out of options," she shot back, calm but firm. "If the controls won't lift the nose, the engines will." For half a second, the captain hesitated. Then he nodded. "Do it." She leaned closer, guiding every move. "Bring the left engine down slowly. Add power on the right. Don't rush it." The engine sounds shifted, uneven, heavy. The plane shook like it didn't like what was happening. Then, almost imperceptibly, the nose began to rise. "There," she said, sharp now. "Hold that. Trim manually, small inputs. Don't force it." The descent slowed, just a little. Enough to change everything. "It's working," the captain breathed, disbelief in his voice. "It's actually working." "Declare emergency," she said immediately. "And get military air support in the air now." The radio crackled as the mayday went out. She swallowed, then added one more thing, something she hadn't said out loud in years. "Use this call sign," she said quietly. "Falcon." On the other end of the radio, there was a pause. Then a voice sharpened with recognition and shock. "Falcon," the voice said. "Stand by. Help is on the way." The first sign of help wasn't visual. It was a change in the air. A faint vibration passed through the cockpit, different from turbulence, sharper, controlled. Then two shadows cut across the clouds ahead, fast and precise. The fighter jets slid into position on both sides of the wounded plane, close enough to see the pilots inside. One of them rocked his wings in a silent signal. "You're not alone anymore." The radio came alive with calm, professional voices. "Falcon, we have you in sight. You're holding altitude. Wings slightly uneven but stable." She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She went straight back to work. "Nearest long runway, straight approach only," she said, already calculating distance and speed. "No sharp turns, no last-minute changes." The answer came instantly. "Runway ahead is clear. Emergency crews are standing by. You've got the whole sky." The ground finally appeared through the windshield, wide and flat, and terrifying. Fire trucks lined the runway like silent witnesses, foam trucks ready, lights flashing. Everyone down there was preparing for a crash. Inside the cockpit, time stretched. Every adjustment felt dangerous. Every second mattered. "Not yet," she said when the captain reached for the landing gear. "One chance only, wait." At her signal, the gear came down, the aircraft shuddering as if it might refuse. Green lights blinked on, one by one. A fragile miracle. Flaps, just a little, she warned. Too much and we lose control. The runway rushed closer, filling the windshield. Speed is high but manageable, she said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Firm landing is better than perfect. At 50 feet, the captain pulled back. The plane slammed into the runway, brutal and unforgiving. Tires exploded, sparks tore down the concrete, metal screamed. The aircraft bounced once, twice, then stayed down, skidding, grinding, shaking itself apart as it slowed. Until finally, impossibly, it stopped. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. No alarms, no screams, just silence. Then the realization hit all at once. They weren't in the air anymore. They were alive. The silence shattered into movement all at once. Doors flew open, flight attendants shouted commands, slides deployed with sharp hisses. Passengers poured out of the plane crying, laughing, praying, hugging strangers like family. Inside the cockpit, the captain slumped forward, hands still locked on the controls. The first officer let out a broken laugh that sounded like he couldn't stop it if he tried. "We're alive," he kept saying, like the words didn't feel real yet. She didn't feel anything at first. Then everything hit her at once. Her legs went weak, her vision blurred, and she sank down onto the cockpit floor, shaking from head to toe. When she stumbled into the cabin, people turned and stared. Someone pointed. "That's her," a voice shouted. "She saved us." Applause broke out, messy and loud, mixed with sobs and disbelief. Hands reached out to touch her shoulder, to thank her, to make sure she was real. She couldn't look at them, couldn't process it. Outside, fresh air hit her like a wave. The slide dropped her onto the runway, and the strength she'd been holding onto vanished. She collapsed onto the tarmac, gasping, body trembling. Paramedics rushed in, voices overlapping, hands checking pulse and breathing. Before she could answer anything, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Her grandfather ran toward her, limping forgotten, tears streaming down his face. He dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms, holding her like he might never let go. "You did it," he whispered over and over. "You brought them home." Above them, the fighter jets climbed back into the sky, rolling their wings in farewell. Cameras were already everywhere, phones held high, news helicopters circling. By the time the sun began to set, the world already knew her name. And the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. By that night, her face was everywhere. Screens in hospital hallways, news vans outside, strangers arguing about her story like they had lived it themselves. "Hero," they said. "Too young," others argued. "Brilliant, reckless, impossible." She lay in a quiet hospital room, lights dim, machines humming softly. "Physically fine," they said, "but shock like that doesn't show up on X-rays." Her grandfather sat beside her bed, holding her hand the way he used to when she was small. "They're going to ask questions," he told her gently. "About your mother, about the training." She nodded, staring at the ceiling. "I know." And they did ask. Officers, investigators, calm voices writing everything down. What her mother taught her, how young she was, how far it went. Rules broken, lines crossed, risks taken. Some called it reckless. Others called it the reason 198 people were alive. 2 days later, she sat at a long table facing cameras and microphones. Hands shaking, back straight, heart pounding harder than it had in the cockpit. When they asked about her mother, the room went quiet. "My mom saw something in me," she said, voice steady but soft. "She knew talent means nothing without preparation. Yes, she broke rules. But because of her, I wasn't helpless when it mattered." Another question came, sharper. "Do you think you should have been put in that position at 16? She didn't look away. "I didn't choose the emergency," she said. "But I'm grateful I was ready for it." When it was over, the cameras shut off, the room emptied, and the noise faded. She finally let herself breathe. Later that night, alone again, she looked out the hospital window at the dark sky. For the first time in 2 years, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like connection. Her mother was gone. But her voice, her lessons, her belief, they were still there. Call signs didn't disappear forever. They just waited for the moment they were needed. And when the sky demanded an answer, Eagle answered.